Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E We are also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
On this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we will be covering the league news from the beginning of camp through the Hall of Fame game up to date. And Jeff, why don't we get started with the league rumors?
So far, the preseason is underway, so that's not a rumor. This is actually happening now. We actually have real football games. Don't have any stakes right now. No starters really playing a lot. There's a lot of question about how many starters are actually going to play. And I think this plays into our very first rumor here that we've been hearing this offseason, is that there are talks between the NFL and the NFLP to eventually expand to 18 games and take away one preseason game. Since they don't use the preseason game anyways, I don't really see a big deal to this. But players are pushing back a little bit because they don't want to play that 18th game. I just don't think they understand the revenue that comes with that 18th game and the fact that their salaries would go up as well. Anything from you on that?
No, I'm very curious how an 18-game season would go, and I don't know if the players would agree to alter something before the CBA is up. Yes, it would be more money. It might be diluted at the same time. I also think that there could be more injuries with an extra week of real play. So I'd be very curious how it plays out. I do think that they need preseason, but they might be able to do away with one less week. So we'll see how that plays out.
Absolutely, and they could always do like where the two teams team up and they do like a bunch of practices against each other. Could add an extra week of that instead of a preseason game. Some of the preseason games are unwatchable anyways, which we would all agree on. So not just me, not just you, everyone would agree on that. But the Cowboys and Dak Prescott were making progress on a deal, and then it all of a sudden went radio silence. So I don't know if this means that they're getting closer to striking a deal or if they've stopped talking. I guess this is going to be one of those things we're going to have to stay tuned and actually watch. I know you believe that Dak will probably be moving on from the Cowboys after this season, but that's totally his right if he wants to at this point. He doesn't have to sign anything, and he pretty much walks.
I think Dak would probably prefer to stay with the Cowboys, but I think after Jordan Love got that massive contract, there's no excuse for the Cowboys to go less than that contract because Dak is, at this point in his career, much better than Jordan Love. I know a lot of people are optimistic with Jordan Love's play at the end of last year, but it was his first year starting after being in the league for several years, whereas Dak has been in the league and playing at a relatively high level. You can debate how high, but Dak deserves more money than Jordan Love at this point. So Jerry Jones has screwed himself and his team over by waiting on these extensions for Dak and CeeDee Lamb and for Parsons, and it gets worse and worse the longer they wait. At this point, Dak having a no trade clause and the Cowboys having no ability to franchise tag him, everything's all in Dak's court. If he wants to take a pay cut, he can and get signed right away. If he wants to hold out for the money he believes he's owed and deserves, he might be on another team next year. And I know we've heard rumors about what team that might be and who it might be with, Jeff.
Yeah, so there is a rumor that it could end up with the Giants with Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick would be able to bookend his career and go back to New York.
That would be devastating for the Cowboys if Dak Prescott went to a division rival, and Dak would be going from CeeDee Lamb to year 2 Malik Neighbors, which I think would be really good as well.
Yeah, absolutely, but I think Dak would have a little bit of a culture shock playing in the frigid cold, potentially up to 4 to 5 to 6 times a season.
I think you and I both have our own speculations on where Dak can go as well. We both happen to have a team that has black. I have one that has black and silver. You have black and gold. Jeff, where do you think Dak's going to play if he doesn't re-sign with the Cowboys?
I think it's going to be with the Saints. It makes more sense to play indoors in a winnable division. He went to the Giants, he would still have to face the Cowboys, the Eagles, and an ascending Washington team. So I think they're going to pick where they're most winnable, especially they're both winding down their career slowly but surely. So why would you want to start in a place where you need to build for a while, especially when it's coming down to the end?
I think that it could be with the Raiders. So I think they're going to be a team that potentially is looking at a new quarterback next season. I think the Saints could be a reasonable option as well. So it's not just the Giants, but those are three teams that I think everyone's thinking could be looking at a quarterback next year.
Absolutely. And speaking of quarterbacks that have made progress on deals, we have two quarterbacks that have signed long-term deals. First, it was Dolphins and quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. They reached a 4-year extension worth $212.4 million. And also, after a brief hold-in, as you just mentioned, the Packers quarterback Jordan Love agrees to a 4-year deal worth $220 million. So he just beat Tua about $8 million, about $2 million a season. So how do you feel about these deals? And we know where Dak Prescott is looking shortly.
I don't like them. I don't think Tua is good enough to be a superstar quarterback. I don't think he deserves to be paid like one. Yes, he put up stats in the regular season, but he's incapable of playing in the cold, and the postseason is typically in the cold, and he's not capable of throwing the ball deep. So those are two, to me, debilitating flaws that they'll never get far in the playoffs. They'll never win a Super Bowl with Tua as their quarterback. That being said, it's extremely hard to find a quarterback that's even in the middle of the pack when it comes to starting, as well as it's even harder to find someone that is top tier quarterback. So it's not like it's easy said, easy done, easy goes. I don't think that this was the right move, in my opinion, for the Dolphins. For the Packers, they're gambling on their scouting ability and the upside of Jordan Love, but small sample size, I wouldn't feel confident. I wouldn't feel confident with that amount of money and what they gave him.
Absolutely. As we know, probably the first 2 to 3 years are guaranteed, and then it's a we'll see. So it's not as big of a commitment as we make it sound here. But speaking of commitments, different position but same result. Bears and wide receiver DJ Moore agree to a 4-year extension. Also, Miami gave wide receiver Tyreek Hill a little more cash to keep him a top paid receiver on a 3-year restructured deal. What do you think of those two wide receivers getting paid?
It makes sense for Miami to keep Tyreek Hill happy, so I think it's reasonable for them. For DJ Moore, it's a little bit surprising because a lot of people were thinking DJ Moore was going to be the odd man out for this coming season with Keenan Allen there and the Bears drafting Rome Odunze, that DJ Moore might be nearing the end of his time with the Bears, but they gave him a 4-year extension. So, and it's a relatively high extension. I think it's similar money to what the Texans gave Nico Collins, maybe a little bit higher than that. So it tells me that they think DJ Moore is still their number one, and that's very curious to me. So I feel more confident about him going into the year, but I still wouldn't put him as a wide receiver one in fantasy. Jeff, does this change your feeling about DJ Moore?
It doesn't for this year, but long term, I could be convinced. First of all, so there's a couple things that I need to have happen here. First thing, I need to see what Caleb Williams does on the field in the NFL. Secondly, I need to see how he distributes the ball between Allen, Dunze, Moore, Komet, Swift. He's got a lot of passing targets. He's not going to throw for 5,000 yards in his rookie year. It's just not going to happen. So someone's going to have to take a back seat, and I don't know if it's going to be an every other week thing, like maybe it's a game plan specific thing, but also they have a defensive head coach, so I don't know how much they're actually going to air it out either. That's the other question that we have in Chicago, because we really haven't seen that just yet.
Well, the other thing is I don't feel confident about their run game in general. Swift, to me, is more of a receiving back than an actual rusher. Like, yes, he can rush a little bit, but I don't feel confident about their rushing game at all. So I could see them passing more, but I agree it's not going to be 5,000 yards in rookie season for Caleb, and I think Moore is the nominal wide receiver one for them. I think Keenan Allen is maybe just a 1-year guy for them, but as a high quality wide receiver two. Rome Odunze will be the wide receiver 3 for them, but high upside developmental guy, sort of. Yes, he's drafted 9th overall. I expect him to be better than most wide receivers in the class, but he won't put up the numbers that his fellow first round wide receivers will. Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. I honestly think Malik Neighbors is probably going to be the highest between the three for this season.
That's a little breaking news.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I think in redrafts, Marvin Harrison is what, bottom of the first round, top of the second in a lot of drafts, which makes no sense to me at all. And Malik Neighbors is into the fourth, top of the fifth. I think that's a way better value than Marvin Harrison. I think Malik Neighbors is more explosive, and he's the featured weapon for the Giants with a strong arm quarterback. So Malik Neighbors makes more sense to be successful this year, but we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, and did you or did you not have Harrison in your top 24, but not Neighbors in your top 24 wide receivers? So that's a little.
I don't think I had either one of them, honestly.
You were I thought you were pretty close on Harrison there.
Let me move
I could
over
be
here.
wrong on that one.
Well, it might have changed since then. I don't remember what I said during the podcast. I think it's changed, but I currently have Malik Neighbors 21 and Marvin Harrison 23.
What? You definitely didn't say Neighbors on the podcast at all.
Well, I update my rankings every now and then, update my projections.
Keep going. I like it.
I think both of them have high wide receiver 2 upside, borderline wide receiver 1 upside. But
yeah,
I wouldn't. Marvin Harrison, you're drafting him at a ceiling if you draft him at the top of the second round. That doesn't make any sense to me.
yeah.
Malik
Yeah, I
Neighbors
would. I'm out.
Malik Neighbors into the fourth, top of the fifth for someone who could finish as a low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2 is awesome. Awesome value.
So where Harrison's going and where I'm willing to take him, and I know we kind of took this on a different ride, but he's going 16th right now in ADP roughly, and I'm willing to take him at 52. So like that's like a big difference, and I won't get any shares of him. And I did text you earlier today, and I said that I believe rookies are getting too much love right now because they're too far up the board for my liking this year. And I think that's because people love the next new thing. And there's a whole bunch of old toys that work just fine, and they're old, reliable toys. So, speaking.
The exception to the rule for rookies is typically wide receiver. I think that's why people are jumping at those guys.
Yeah. And speaking of old toys, Chiefs extend kicker Harrison Butker with a highest ever paid kicker contract over 4 years. Now, I know you're a big Butker fan, and he probably earned this deal, correct?
I think so. And last year, I feel like the Chiefs didn't score as many touchdowns as we were expecting them to. Their average points per game dropped from 28 to 21. So I think he's been more crucial for them, and he's been fairly accurate. He's still relatively young. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely. And then there was a handful of guys recently to get they needed a little bit of extra to get them into camp. And that started off with Matthew Stafford, Amari Cooper, and Courtland Sutton. How do you feel about giving these guys a little bit of extra just to get them into camp and make them a little bit happy?
I mean, I'm fine with it. I think that the Rams had to with Matt Stafford because they don't have a realistic succession plan for after him. Amari Cooper, it seems like they gave him a little extra money just to make him happy for this year, but it doesn't sound like he's in their long-term plans. So that's interesting. They didn't add any years on, so he's got an expiring deal and could be swapped for a player that we're going to talk about a little bit later, which will be interesting if that comes to fruition. Courtland Sutton, I think he's a better wide receiver than people realize, but he didn't get much yardage last year, so he didn't pop as much. And I know the 10 touchdowns, kind of fluky a little bit. Touchdowns are always fluky. So people probably think that he's not going to be that productive this year, and I think that that's potentially wrong. So Courtland Sutton's someone that I think could be better than people expect.
Yeah, quite possibly. But you were just mentioning the wide receivers that could potentially be swapped. We have a few holdouts and a few hold-ins. First, the holdout, CeeDee Lamb, there's absolutely no update on him at all. I do expect him to report before the beginning of the season, but we don't know how close to the beginning of the season before he reports. And then we have Jamar Chase that appears to be doing a hold-in, so he's not practicing while sitting on the sidelines. I don't know if there's much of an update on that one, but it does seem like that is the way that players do go. when they're trying to seek out a new deal. And then also wide receiver Brandon Ayuk with the 49ers. He's also doing the same thing, holding in. So there was a rumor last week that he was inside the 5-yard line to signing a extension with the 49ers. And now this week, they've done a complete 180 and they've agreed to trade terms with 2 other teams. And one of the teams is the New England Patriots and one's the Cleveland Browns. Pittsburgh, who we thought was a favorite, was reported out, but that does look like they are sneaking their way back into the race, but I don't believe they've agreed to terms just yet. And so in order for a deal to get done for Ayuk, it's going to have to be first, the 49ers agree on the compensation for Ayuk from the team. And then secondly, the team's going to have to negotiate a long-term deal with Ayuk. So this is a 2-pronged attack, and Ayuk has to want to go play there. And from everything I've heard, the 49ers still want Ayuk around. So this will be really interesting to see how this plays out. What do you got on these 3?
I think New England can offer them probably the best overall package between like a potentially really high draft pick for next year's draft compared to the other guys. And I think they have a slew of wide receivers that they could offer in return. They could do a veteran and a young, talented guy, both to the 49ers plus draft compensation. So they could get Kendrick Bourne back as well as a young guy like Polk or Baker or Demario Douglas, or they could get a different vet like Smith-Schuster, who has had some productive seasons on other teams before he went to New England. So like Kansas City and Pittsburgh. So that's entirely possible they can get a veteran and a young talented player from them. Cleveland, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense because they just traded for Jerry Jeudy and gave him a huge contract, which makes no sense in its own right, but they did it. So I don't know why they would go after another wide receiver at this point when they already have so much committed to Deshaun Watson and Jeudy now. They have Amari Cooper. Yes, it's for 1 more year, but he's still a very productive wide receiver. They drafted Tillman in the 3rd round last year, who I think is a talented but developmental guy going into his 2nd year now. If they kept Amari Cooper, I think Tillman could be a full-time starter year 3. So it doesn't make any sense to me that Cleveland is even pursuing this when their star running back is also hurt. I don't believe their quarterback play is very good. I don't think they're as close to competing as people think they are. The only thing that makes sense to me is that Cleveland is trying to make Pittsburgh pay more to be able to get Brandon Ayuk. I think Pittsburgh's very interested in Ayuk. Ayuk really wants to go there. His dad is the coach. Unofficial, secret, fake dad, Mike Tomlin, who just looks like Brandon Ayuk, which is funny. Pittsburgh could use another wide receiver to complement Pickens. I don't think that they have enough weapons. However, we don't know what they're going to get out of the quarterback play with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. If I was Ayuk, I wouldn't be super excited about those quarterback options, but Pittsburgh has gotten 10 wins like almost every season. They're very competitive in their own division as well as in the AFC. They have a really good defense. So in that regard, it makes sense. But Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator. I don't think he's ever had 2 wide receivers that were both featured. He typically targets tight ends. I think there was one season at Tennessee where they had Corey Davis and AJ Brown both have pseudo productive seasons, but that's the lone exception in his coaching career. I would still rather the Steelers than the other 2 options, but the best option to me is the one that least fighting for him, and that is the Washington Commanders. I think would be the best spot for Ayuk to be reunited with his college quarterback. I think that they have a vacancy, a wide receiver that they could really use help, whether they send McLaurin back or Jahan Dotson back, or they keep all 3. But that would make them much more competitive, would make the rookie Jaden Daniels settle in a little bit better as well. So that to me would be the best spot, but they're not fighting very hard for him from what I hear. Either that or because they're in the same conference as the 49ers, maybe the 49ers have a NFC tax on them. I don't know. So, Jeff, do you think I covered everything there? How do you feel about those spots?
So I think his best place is to just stay in San Francisco. So he may end up accepting the deal that they offered based on all of this information coming out, because I wouldn't want to play with May. Wouldn't really want to play with Watson right now, especially in the cold. And then secondly and lastly, I mean, we don't even know where Pittsburgh's going to go at quarterback after this year. Like, they have 1 year commitments to 2 players, and then we'll see. We will see where he goes. The sweepstakes is heating up, so we'll see where he ends up. I think this will be resolved though in the next week or so.
I hope so.
Extension or trade. And
I don't know,
then
we also saw the Christian McCaffrey slip up where he said former teammate when referring to him.
I did see that, but let's not act. I don't think that they would give him any inside news on teammates or anything like that. So maybe he's going off of what Ayuk told him or whatever happened there. But so speaking of former teammates, we have a few retirements to talk about here. So Raiders wide receiver Michael Gallup, free agent running back Kenyon Drake, Panthers running back Rashad Penny, and Jets running back Tariq Cohen all have called it quits during training camp. This is not unusual. There's usually a player or 2 or 3 or 4 like this that say they don't want to go through camp and they call it a career. Any of these guys surprising, and any of these guys that you think that could return? Because this will probably be the last time we talk about them.
The Michael Gallup is the only one that was a little bit surprising, just because I think he had a relatively high contract. So he's giving up a lot of money to retire. Either he absolutely hates the Raiders, or his body is worn down a little early. Because I think what is he, like 28, something like that? I don't
Yeah,
think
he's
that
still
old.
pretty young. He had the one big contract with the Cowboys and the ACL tear, and that's all I remember about his career. But he's the age of 28 right now, so could see a return sometime throughout the year.
That was completely off memory, so surprised I got it right on. Yeah, Rashad Penny is not that old himself and was a former first round pick, but he, Drake, Cohen have had some significant injury history, so I can understand that. And it's not like Penny was going to be a starter. Kenyon Drake apparently didn't even get any camp invites. Tariq Cohen would have come back more as a special teams player, but the Jets
Would
have
have been
so
helpful.
many running backs, it doesn't even make sense to have them on the roster.
He could be that special teams guy with the new kickoff rule that we got to see for the first time this last week. You could tell people are still confused on how to actually play this, and over time you're going to see people be able to drop plays and scheme this a lot better, and that'll be really fun to watch.
Already a lot more returns, so
Yeah, I think 100% of stuff's returned now, so I'll take it. I will take it. But there are several players to start off either on the PUP or the NFI list, so the non-football injury or the personally and unable to perform list. And some of them were running backs. Nick Chubb coming back from the ACL tear. Nyheim Hines also coming back from the ACL tear. Jonathan Brooks coming back from the ACL tear. He's out until at least week 3 of the NFL season, so he is going to at least be out the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. Keaton Mitchell also coming back from an ACL tear. Any of these guys you're worried about other than Jonathan Brooks not making it back before the season starts?
I think it's actually the team said week 3, but I think someone looked at the pup list and he really can't come back to probably week 4.
Yeah,
So
it depends if they leave him on or if they take him off and they waste a roster spot for the first 2 weeks.
So it's possible, but right now Jonathan Brooks, I think, is going redrafts around 8 or 9. So I'm
I
willing
would
to
love
still
for
take a
his
step.
position to fall.
I would be willing to take a stab on him to be a second half of the year kind of running back. So you could take someone earlier like James Conner, who might lose his job 2/3 the way through the season to Benson potentially, and have Jonathan Brooks take off for you, something like that. But to me, Jonathan Brooks, just where he's going, I feel like that's fine. Nick Chubb's going pretty late too. I feel like that's a second half of the year running back to target and high ups. Both of them high upside, even though Nick Chubb is older. Hines has never done anything for me. I've never been on the Hines train. I don't care. He's always talked up in fantasy communities. He's had 1, maybe 2 productive years. Other than that, to me, kind of been irrelevant. So I don't really care. That doesn't do anything for me. Keaton Mitchell is someone that also might be an end of the year guy, but he is, to me, lower profile than Jonathan Brooks or Nick Chubb. If I get Derrick Henry, I'm getting Keaton Mitchell. If I have deep roster leagues, I'm all about having the handcuffs. So I will absolutely think about Keaton Mitchell in almost any league that I have, even if I don't have Derrick Henry as a dart throw, high upside, high speed, explosive player. So I'm about
Absolutely.
that. Yep.
So I do think Keaton Mitchell and Nick Chubb could miss time to start off the season, but Naheem Hines should be good to go because we're well past a year of his injury right now. So I don't even really know what he's coming back from.
Wasn't it a jet ski injury?
Yeah, the Bills put him on the NFI and they did not pay him last year for it, and that was he made a big deal about that. But you can't get injured outside of the sport doing sport things. And his biggest claim to fame was the week after the Damar Hamlin game. He returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns the very next week against the Patriots. So that was his big claim to fame for Naheem Hines. All right. So we have a couple older wide receivers that are on the lists that I mentioned, and that's Kendrick Bourne coming back from the ACL, Mike Williams coming back from the ACL, and Odell Beckham Jr. coming back from an undisclosed injury. Like, he's got a few things to work through before he's fully good to go. Thoughts on these three? Any of them worth taking a stab at? And
Mike Williams is worth a dart throw to me because we don't know who the wide receiver 2 is going to be with the Jets. Um, he's a former first round wide receiver, and I think he's still got the upside. I think he's the best wide receiver between the three of those. To me, Odell Beckham is much, much diminished from when he was a top fantasy starter. And Kendrick Bourne, to me, will not have any real value with the Patriots. If he gets moved to San Francisco as part of a deal for Brandon Ayuk, that is the only time I could see his value being worth it. So I think he would shoot up to a high quality wide receiver 3 if he went to San Francisco.
we will see. But I completely agree with you. The only person I'm taking a throw at here right now is Mike Williams, and he kind of intrigues me because he's going really late. And I know he has the talent. I just don't know if he can stay on the field for very long. Maybe changing fields will help.
Who's better this year? Who puts up more stats, Mike Williams or Keenan Allen?
Probably Keenan, because I have a feeling that Caleb Williams and him have a good connection off the field, and it should translate to on the field. But other than that, I don't really have a lot to stand on right now. But that's kind of why I'm skittish on DJ Moore that we talked about earlier, because I do believe that off the field, Allen and Williams have a great connection, and that's something that we can't define with these big money contracts that DJ Moore just got.
Jeff is using his feelings.
I am.
That's
I'm just
first.
going off of energy, positive energy here.
I just want to win the Mike Williams versus Keenan Allen debate, Jeff.
Finally, it
This
only
might
took
be
you
the year.
16 years.
Year.
So we have 3 tight ends that are also trying to come back from injury. TJ Hawkinson, rumored to be very ahead of schedule. Tyler Higbee on the PUP list with the torn ACL as well. And then Gwan Johnson, who was hurt during mini camps with a foot injury and got foot surgery. I believe Juwan Johnson will be back before the season starts. At least that was the rumor very early on with his injury. Do you expect either Hawkinson or Higbee to be back before the regular season? And would you take a stab on either of them?
I don't think either is going to be back. The only one I'd take a stab on is TJ Hawkinson, and I think that I would pair him with a high upside, risky tight end. And I know that TJ is going to be used heavily when he is back. Even if it's a rookie quarterback, I think they would target him as well. I'm not big on Juwan Johnson at all. I've not been on his bandwagon, and I think that the Saints have too many tight ends, and one of them is named Taysom Hill, and gets used in every position, but only has eligibility for one, which
Tight end,
drives me
right?
crazy. I think he's only tight end, even though he plays quarterback. I feel like more than tight end. So I'm not in on Juwan Johnson at all. Higbee just got significant competition with Kobe. Was it Kobe Parkinson that just got a huge contract with them?
Higbee
Higbee's
got one last year too, so they both have huge contracts.
and you pointed out that Higbee's been in the top 10 a few times now with the Rams.
Yeah.
He's finished as top 10 tight end. So I don't know if he does that with another tight end there or not. And with now Puka, now Cooper Kupp, and Demarcus Robinson, that's as deep as this receiving core has been for the Rams. So I don't know if I would bite on Higbee this year. So probably just Hawkinson.
Yeah, absolutely. And quietly, the Rams have rebuilt their team like with very little picks and hitting on picks in late rounds, and now they have like a receiving core that people are legitimately scared about. But so we can move on to new injuries from camp. And you could let me know if it's going to impact their draft stock with you and if you think they're going to make it back for the regular season. First, we have Justin Herbert with a foot. It looks like he's going to be out about 2 weeks. Do you think he'll be back for the regular season? And is there any impact to his draft stock?
He will be in a boot for 2 weeks. I think he's out the entire preseason. I think he'll start off slow week 1. It's a new offense, and he's injured. Think that things are going to swing my way prediction wise for the Chargers this year. This is something that it helps my case for that, but I don't want to see guys get hurt. That's not why I want to be right. I want to be right because I figured it out, not because things just happened to fall apart. So don't want them to be hurt. I don't think that they're going to be good this year. I know a lot of people were like, Harbaugh's going to turn it around year 1. He didn't turn it around year 1 with Michigan. He's not going to turn around year 1 with the Chargers. I think things will go in a positive direction, but I don't want Herbert this year in redraft. I take him in Dynasty, but not redraft.
You're much higher on the Raiders than you are the Chargers, which is very reverse of everyone else right now. But we will see.
I think if you put a healthy Herbert on the Raiders, that is a team that can compete with the Chiefs right now. But to me, the Chargers are a team that only have Herbert, and the Raiders are a team that's built that just needs a quarterback
and a coach.
We'll see about Pierce, honestly.
Yeah. Chargers have the better coach and the better quarterback right now, which is 2 of the 3 pieces
I think that's fair.
in order to go far.
I think that's very fair.
Yeah. So now we have a plethora of running backs. We'll start off with the 49ers running backs. We have
all of them.
Isaac. What?
Just all of them. All the 49ers running backs.
Yeah. Isaac Grendo with a hamstring. Elijah Mitchell with a hamstring. Christian McCaffrey with a calf. Are you worried about any of these players' availability for week 1? And is it impacting your draft position for any of them?
With Isaac Grendo, I was not worried about him because I didn't anticipate him starting off the year on the active roster.
What? Breaking news.
I mean, not starting, not really playing much until maybe later in the year. He was so raw as a prospect, but like very athletic. I just didn't see it. Mitchell, they were talking about giving him more work this year. I think Mason's still on the team. I think they're going to be relying on Mason early on. I think McCaffrey, I'm still completely fine with McCaffrey. I know people are panicking on him. I know it's going to be a painful injury. I've seen McCaffrey play through injuries before. Yes, he's missed time historically, but the last couple of years he's been fairly healthy, and he's played through injury. I'm not that worried. I'd still take him number 1 overall in redraft leagues right now and not worry about it. I mean, maybe as we go further in the preseason, in the offseason, maybe we'll hear worse things, and maybe I'll reevaluate then. But right now, I'm not worried about it. But their running back core is so decimated right now, they had to bring back Breida, of all people.
The former teammate comment, was that done after his injury? Because he looks kind of fine there.
I don't know. But I know McCaffrey.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, McCaffrey, the calf thing is 2 days old, and they just talked about it today.
Okay. I think he'll be fine. I do wonder sometimes if these star running backs get these injuries so they can sit out of camp and be fresh for the season, and people aren't like, what is he doing just sitting there doing nothing? And not playing in preseason games that I'm paying my hard-earned money to go watch. I wonder if some of them are phantom longer-term injuries. And you're probably going to let an injury like that, if it's real, fully heal versus like 98% heal in the regular season. You'd be like, I'm good, let's go. So I guess that does add to a little bit of time. All right. A couple more running backs with some injuries here. We have Joe Mixon with a quad, Kendre Miller with a hamstring, Deontay Foreman with a scary neck injury where he got carted off the field, and Deuce Vaughn battling a hamstring as well. Are you worried about any of these guys, or are they impacting your draft position at all?
Deuce Vaughn and Deontay Foreman don't affect anything for me because I wasn't going to take them this year in redrafts. To me, the hamstring with Kendre Miller isn't the concerning part. It's the comments from the coach who basically said It's a problem that he has constantly that he can't get on the field because he's basically insinuating he's always hurt and be like pissed off about it. Which to me, you can't always help injuries. Sometimes they just happen. And for Dennis Allen to say that about Kendre Miller, who they spent a high draft pick on, it's a little wild. To me, it's someone lashing out who probably has 1 year left as a head coach. But it does make me feel better about Alvin Kamara. So I feel a lot more secure about Alvin Kamara. I still would
He's
want
going
Kendre
far too
Miller
low.
as a handcuff, but
I believe he's going far too low in drafts right now. But
we'll talk
no
about
one
that
that I
in the
know
next
listened to
episode.
this podcast until drafts are over with. But Kamara will be a target in a lot of my leagues this year.
As far as Joe Mixon, I'm
Yeah.
concerned that he's kind of been out for at least 4 days, maybe as much as a week, depending on what you believe. But he's really the only running back there. Like you don't feel good about Damian Pierce, who to me is a good athlete, but he's a power runner, doesn't fit the scheme. They like Jawar, who they just drafted this year. And they like Dare, but he to me is the rotational guy, more special teams player. They brought in Cam Akers, who didn't look great running the ball against the Bears in preseason, but had two really good pass plays, two really good catches. So if Mixon's out a significant amount of time, or if he's going to have lingering issues, I don't feel good about this rushing attack at all. I think that the Texans could shift to an even higher passing volume of all things this year.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I'd be relatively okay with it. I like a little bit more balance, but I'm honestly in a league where I'm desperate to have a running back. Joe Mixon's one of the running backs available for an auction draft, and I don't really feel good about bidding on him. I might not even bid on him because it might be expensive anyway, just with the shortage. But I don't like it.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and we can move on to the wide receivers. First, we have a trio of rookies and Roman Wilson with an ankle, Xavier Legette with a foot, and Ricky Pearsall with a shoulder re-aggravation. Are you worried about any of these guys? Are any of these guys undraftable at this point because of their injury? Or are you going to leave them right where you had them?
Well, Dynasty, obviously, you're taking all three of them. Redrafts, they're all dart throws anyway, so they might go undrafted and they might be waiver fodder for people. Pearsall, his stock is going to shoot up if they trade Ayuk away. Roman Wilson, if they don't bring in another wide receiver, I think Roman Wilson could be a good value at some point. But these are all year two guys for me. They're not necessarily year one producers.
Completely agree. And then we have a few veterans here that also have some nicked up bruises here. We have ribs for or midsection for Rashad Bateman. And I know that you believe that he's overhyped. So this might help pull down some of his hype a little bit. We have Raheed Shaheed, who is going drafted right now according to ADP. He has a hamstring, which I guess is a common thing for camps here. Hamstrings. We have DeAndre Hopkins, who injured his knee and is out several weeks. He could return for week 1. Paris Campbell with a groin, probably not draftable in leagues. And we have the big one here with Puka Nacua and a knee. But by all reports so far, he should be back by week 1. Are you worried about any of those players going into the...
I'm worried why people still have Paris Campbell on a team to begin with. I don't think to me, he's past his fantasy relevance at this point. Rashad Bateman, I worry about people's sanity that they keep trying to target Rashad Bateman. Every year's Rashad Bateman's here. The Ravens keep trying to make him happen, but through inefficiencies, ineffectiveness, or just straight out injuries, it never will happen. I don't buy into Bateman. I'm not target. There's just a cult that likes Rashad Bateman and J.K. Dobbins, and they just want to draft them every single year. So don't buy into that. DeAndre Hopkins to me is a little bit significant. Might shift things towards the new signing Calvin Ridley. So that is something to keep an eye out for those of you trying to decide between the two of them. I was leaning Hopkins, and now I might go Ridley out of this. But it's concerning for Levis and the Titans, who lost their right guard to retirement as well. Things continue to fall apart for that offense, so that's concerning. Rashid Shaheed, he's got high upside, but he is a real dart throw out of all these guys. But Puka, To me, this knocks him to the wide receiver 2 position for the Rams overall for the season, and I like Cooper Kupp more, especially since Puka is going into the first round, top of the second round range in redrafts. I would much rather have Cooper Kupp, who's probably fourth or fifth rounder at this point. Better value. He's the one that's healthy right now, and that's really the deciding factor.
Absolutely. I'm still doing Puka really high out of these, and then obviously DeAndre Hopkins is a mid-round pick, but I'm glad that you're finally coming around on Ridley. That's what I just heard there. And that offense intrigues me a lot because it has a lot of potential and a lot of firepower. And I just don't know if Will Levis is the guy that could distribute the ball and be a gunslinger, I guess, for a whole entire season.
He'll be a gunslinger. He won't be accurate or consistent, but he'll be a gunslinger.
Ian Thomas out with hamstring and calf injuries. So that kind of opens the door to Jatavian Sanders being a thing to start the season kind of early for the Carolina Panthers, because he's by de facto their tight end 1 right now and getting the tight end 1 reps. And then Tegan, how do you say his last name? Quitoriano? There we go. He suffered a calf injury in the Hall of Fame game. Any of these guys that it's impacting your draft stock, or a lot of these guys we weren't even considering drafting, but Sam Laporta impacting your draft stock?
No, I don't really draft tight ends that high. This is the deepest that the tight end position has been in a long time. So I'm not going to spend top 3 round capital on Laporta, but it may adjust how other people rank him. If he slides significantly, maybe I'll consider taking him. Like maybe if he goes down to like a 5th round spot. I doubt he'll get that far though, and I think he'll be fine.
He won't. He's my first pick of the 3rd round, and that's where I would be willing to take him, but I think he'll be long gone in the 2nd round if I had to guess.
I just get through like mock drafts and stuff, and there's like 10 or 11 tight ends I'm more than happy with. People don't typically take 2 tight ends until real late in the draft, or at all. So I just wait, and I wait for either Ingram, I wait for Pitts, I wait for maybe Njoku.
Yeah, you could always pair Hawkinson up and stream until he comes back. But yeah, I'm comfortable with taking Laporta high. I have Kelsey 1 spot ahead of Laporta right now, but that's not that bold, I don't think. I don't think. I know a lot of rankers have it the other way around. To round up our injury news, we have Michael Badgley, kicker for the Detroit Lions. He had a hamstring injury that required surgeries on the IR. He's out for the year. They signed the UFL kicker, Jake Bates, I believe is his name, and he will be handling the kicking duties for them this year, it seems like, because I haven't brought anyone else in just yet. Also, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, and Anthony Richardson were fully cleared for the beginning of camp, so they are all systems go and Aaron Rodgers also, so they're all systems go going into camp. Quarterbacks all seem mostly healthy with the exception of Andy Dalton and Justin Herbert. And maybe Geno Smith, who got his whole body image, it feels like last week. All right, just a couple of transactions that we need to react to here. We have the Steelers releasing wide receiver Mike Callaway, who is then re-signed by the Saints. Not a big deal. I expect him to be like the 4th or 5th receiver. You don't expect him to get a good spot with the Saints this time around, do you?
No.
His thing is kind of past. The Jaguars released kicker Riley Patterson, and he was claimed by the Commanders, who really didn't have a kicker after the whole Brandon McManus fiasco. So now they have a kicker at least on their roster. Still not draftable, in my opinion. We have the Texans signed running back Cam Akers to a deal which you did mention earlier, and he scored a touchdown in the Hall of Fame game. I do believe that he ends up making the roster. He's still really young. I think he's 24 years old. So we'll just see if his ankles can stay attached to his feet with his Achilles tendon. He's already had 2 ruptures.
Did you watch the Hall of Fame game?
I watched probably like 75% of it, and I'm sorry, your team was the first team to lose this year.
Preseason doesn't mean anything, but
momentum.
But that touchdown, like it almost wasn't a touchdown. Just the way he caught it, like backwards like that, like it could have been at the line. Honestly, I feel like they're like, okay, let's give it to him. He tore both his Achilles. Let's just give it to him. I don't think he looks that great as a runner. He looked okay in the passing game.
Yeah, which could actually land him a role on the team, because with him and Pierce, they could kind of fill the Mixon role with the two of them.
Maybe.
And so then we have the 49ers reuniting with running back Matt Breida. Don't expect Breida to make the roster. As you mentioned, there was 4 running backs that we like better that will probably make the roster, with Mason, Mitchell, Grendo, and McCaffrey. So I think Breida's just a camp body, and he's going to get paid to help the mountain camp and preseason games. And also we'll give him some audition, because I do expect him to be able to sign with a team sometime this year and maybe do a spot start here or there.
Yeah, I feel like the New York Giants are very thin at running back, so I feel like they could use some
That's where
depth.
he left. That's where he left. That was where he was last year. He did have a few spot starts with Barkley's injuries. And then we have the Ravens signing veteran wide receiver, 28-year-old Russell Gage, who I believe, because you just said that you don't like how they're trying to make Rashad Bateman a thing. I think there's a veteran receiver that could easily slide into that number 2 wide receiver slot. I don't know if he has enough time between now and the beginning of the season, roughly 4 to 5 weeks. So we will see if he can pick up the playbook fast enough and get some good, meaningful reps in preseason games to stick on the roster. But their receiving core is kind of shallow, in my opinion. So he does have a shot to at least.
Well, I think he can be in the top 5 wide receivers for them. I don't think he'll necessarily be fantasy relevant, but I'm just waiting to hear any news about Michael Thomas at all, and if he's going to get signed by a team.
I'm waiting for Michael Thomas. I'm waiting for Hunter Renfrow, who signed a big deal with the Raiders, and then they decided not to use him. And they would try to trade him and not use him, and like that was a really weird situation last year. I thought Hunter Renfrow was a good slot receiver, and I didn't know slot receivers were a dime a dozen now in the league, post Julian Edelman and Wes Welker.
Well, a lot of top tier wide receivers want to be put in the slot so that they get the ball more often.
Hey, feed him the ball. But I think that does it for all of our news. This was a crazy amount of news for our 99th episode, everybody. This is our 99th episode that will be airing. That means the next episode will be number 100, triple digits.
Man, number 100 is our top 24 running backs, huh?
I'm ready. I'm going to smoke you.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading and listening to this episode, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy, and with our handle at N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.